welcome back to Wounds to Wisdom, Healing Through Veteran and First Responder Narratives. This is a mini series. I want to give a shout out to Denny Caballero with Security Halt Productions. Thank you for producing this for us. So today we are talking to Scott Duncan, who is one of our authors on Wounds to Wisdom. This is a book of 29 authors who are first responders and veterans who have hit a dark time, trauma, cumulative trauma, maybe an incident, or even transition from the military where there's a lot of grief, or retirement for first responders. There's a lot that can go on with having this job. So what our authors want to do for other protectors is to say, if you are suffering in silence right now, you are not alone. We have been there, and they want to share how they navigated out. So I'm so thrilled to have Scott. He is a lieutenant colonel with the United States Marine Corps, retired actually. And he has been a great friend with the Power of Our Story tribe. Scott, I'm so happy to have you here to have this conversation, to hear your story today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me today, Sarah. I'm honored to be here.
Well, let's get into it then. Before we hear about some of your tougher times,
do it.
I'd love to hear, where did you come from and what was your childhood like?
Okay. Well, I'm from Virginia originally. I was born in Virginia. My dad was in the Air Force. We moved a lot of different places, Panama, then in Central America, back to Virginia, Illinois, Colorado, and then back to Virginia. And my folks wound up splitting up when I was in fifth grade, and life kind of changed completely. It went from being a childhood of maybe not understanding. Of course, you're a kid. You don't understand much outside of your realm of being a kid. But the world changed in one night. And so my childhood, I used to feel I was robbed of things as a kid growing up. But as I grew, and of course, the story that I'm adding to Wounds of Wisdom really gets into that. But there were struggles growing up without a dad, and that's one of the main things I talked about in the beginning of what happened with my parents and the impact that had not only on me but on family members and other folks that I cared for. But Virginia was a great place to grow up. I'll say that for sure. I lived in Virginia Beach, had great friends, played sports, football, pole vaulting, and had family members there too. So that was nice. It wasn't like we were in some place where the Air Force took us and we didn't have family. So I was blessed to have amazing grandparents, aunts and uncles that were part of helping me become who I would become down the road.
And do you feel like that all kind of directed you to the military? Or if not, what directed you to the military? What do you feel like was the draw for you?
There's a number of things. That's a great question. First and foremost, my grandfather was a Marine. He served in the Second World War. He was a Depression era young guy. Growing up on a farm in Erie, Pennsylvania, he didn't know much more than, being on a farm. And his best friend came to him when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. He said, "Paulie, Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. We're going to go become Marines." He's like, "Okay, I'm not even really sure what that is, but if you're doing it, I'm in." So that's what he did. And he survived the Battle of Tarawa, came back. He was a fireman for 35 years, went from a lineman to captain. Just a incredible man. So I grew up listening to stories of the Marine Corps, and of course, some of his fireman stories too. But he was the guy I always felt if I can be a third of who he was, I'd be doing okay. So he was the kind of the prime driver towards why I went into the Marine Corps. My dad served in the Air Force. My stepfather was in the Navy. I had other family members that served. My brother was in the Army. So it was kind of something our family did and that's not uncommon. A lot of families or people that serve is because other family members have. It becomes the family business. So that was it. And not only that, just the challenge that the Marine Corps presented was something that was appealing as well.
I can imagine. Yeah. And before we even get into the harder part of the story, what did you love about being a Marine? Like when you think back about your career and you think about the great parts of it, what did that look like?
The best part are the other Marines that you serve with. That is, absolutely the answer that I believe, because Marines take care of their own. As leaders, you're a servant leader in the Marine Corps, which means certainly the mission comes first, but people are right there. It's, like this. Some people think it's mission and people. I think it's both, because without people, there is no mission. So the people that are on your left and right, whether you're in garrison, here and home, whether you're deployed, training and combat, it's the links and the relationships that you form with those folks that make you do the best that you can do to meet mission, because you're taking care of your people as you're meeting mission. And being like my time in Iraq, that was the absolute best unit I ever served with. I was a major at the time. I was the XO for the unit. Served with a lot of fantastic folks over the 21 years of service, but something that you trained for as a Marine is combat, and not everyone, has the opportunity, so to speak, to do that. Now, during the time I served, which was half of my service was 9/11 and beyond. So a lot of us got to see, what being in combat's like. And it's quite incredible to survive and come back from that and reflect on who those people were that you served with, how incredibly awesome they were. And to feel blessed that you survived those tough times, right? But the people, not that there's one instance over hundreds, because I could sit here and talk for quite a bit of time about, specifics and certain people, but on total, those guys and gals are the reason you love being a Marine. And there's a lot of history that comes with being a Marine too. I'll say that we're very, very proud of our history as Marines.
Yeah, I think you can always feel that and hear that when you talk to a Marine. It's, so it just sounds like an incredible camaraderie with brothers and sisters that you serve with. Now, when moving
if
forward,
I can, real quick, sir, if I can.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. The movie 300. Have you seen that movie about the Spartans?
No.
Well, for those that have seen that movie, you'll understand what it's like to be a Marine.
300. I'm writing that down.
Yeah.
Okay. That being said, many of us have heard about how difficult it was to be a combat veteran in Iraq. And there was a lot of casualties there. You have this intensity, but like you said, you highlight the connection and, the powerful connection of the people on your right and your left, the people right there on the mission with you. So when you think about the time that was maybe the darkest period for you, was it active duty, or was it even the trauma and grief that comes from transitioning, into another planet, as some have described it, or, just trying to get into civilian life? Like, what do you feel like was that wall or that day for you that was so difficult?
Right. Well, again, I feel blessed that things have worked out for me over time. They really have. And I give that to the grace of God. I'll say that right up front. Some things you plan for, other things come your way, and, you kind of scratch your head and wonder. But in the end, I am very blessed that things have worked out for me transition wise. As far as I know, I don't have any specific issues that are related to trauma within the military, other than the fact that, I've grieved folks that I know, and folks that I didn't know, but because being in combat, you see a lot of things, right? That I think about from time to time, but I have peace with that. Again, that, I thank God for that, because I've prayed that would be the case. I think for me, when it comes to some of the, the trauma, the tough things in life, that came from me very early. And as I mentioned in the onset about my folks, breaking up when I was younger, that was very difficult. It was unexpected. And all the tough times over about a 7-year period built a lot of resilience, toughness, and character that helped shape who I am today, that even I think helped direct me towards wanting to be a Marine. And so, yeah, I miss the Marine Corps, and that's hard, right? When you are with an organization that you give 110% of your time, effort, and goodness to, and one day it's over. And so you turn around, you all march up to the front gate together. This is, figuratively speaking, right? You keep marching and they all do an about face and go back to doing what they do in the Marine Corps. And, you're watching them go back to work, and you're like, okay, what am I going to do? And hopefully you've got a plan, but this depends on how you leave service, right? I was blessed to serve 21 years. And so I had a retirement and eventually got into doing things, helping veterans on the outside. So yeah, my struggles came early in life. And again, it absolutely helped form the person that I became.
And, I think, gosh, we've known each other for about 3 years, I think now, 3.5 years. And I always have seen you. So I can imagine just hearing about your childhood and about kind of your life in the Marine Corps. It just makes sense that you are who you are in always wanting to help those that are transitioning, or just, you continue your service as a civilian to others. Maybe we should shift also to like what you're seeing with other service members. Is there something that really hits your heart? When we think about those that are suffering in silence and what you wish you could do to help them, what comes up for you when you hear that? And what would you want to say to those that are suffering in silence?
Yeah, that's another good question, because transition from the military is a very personal thing. It's different for everybody. Folks fall into categories, if you will, but everyone has a personal story or circumstance that makes it a little different from the other guy and gal that are transitioning. As I mentioned, I was fortunate. I served 21 years, had a retirement. The folks that do 2 or 3 enlistments, or do one stint as an officer and then get out and move on to other things, it's different for them. But I think a common factor that goes across all lines and times of service is, as I kind of mentioned a second ago, when you leave military service, that is a culture. That is who you have become. And quite often you're putting your personal life on the back burner, including time with your spouse, with your kids, anything that you've done prior to being in the service, like hobbies and stuff. Now, not everybody, some folks make time for that, but I personally didn't. I poured my heart and soul into being a Marine because it was 24/7. And as an officer, it's a little different. You're on call all the time. Not that, junior enlisted folks aren't, but as a leader, you're actively engaged, and phone calls come during crazy times at night to be informed of an issue that you have to get up and take resolution on. But so where I'm going with this is, it's not uncommon that when people leave that level of service, that they struggle with finding out their sense of purpose and who they are. And even folks that move on to successful careers, financially they're doing well, but there's something else that they feel like they've lost and they're not sure what it is and they're struggling with it. And for me, I did have some of that as I left service. And during that time, my youngest daughter, who I was fortunate to have 4 years with, as a retired Marine, we became very close. And then she graduates high school and goes off to college. And I was depressed about that. I wasn't ready for that. As preparing for things, you should have a plan. Well, I didn't have a plan for the empty nest that came after that. It's very different. And of course, this, right? When you spend a lifetime with, wife and kids, and then again, in one day that kind of shifts. And the gal that cut my hair for years, one day was, "Hey, Scott, can I ask you a question? It's a personal question." Sure. Is everything okay? You don't seem like the guy that I know. You usually come in and you're upbeat, and we talk about all kinds of stuff. You've just been very quiet, the past few weeks, and I was just hoping that things were okay. And I was like, "Well, yeah, I guess you're right." And she's like, is it because Taylor is no longer at home? It hit me like a ton of bricks, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, wow, that's what this is," right? And the reason I'm sharing this is because life moves on no matter what, right? Time just keeps ticking. And so for people transitioning, it's not just one thing you're transitioning from. It could be that you're transitioning and having your kids leave, or maybe the relationship with your spouse is changing and there's divorce or somebody die, and so when you combine all those things, it could be tough. And so I think it's easy for some to kind of get lost in the muck, in the mire, and not having that certainty that they had, that one thing they could turn to, being a Marine or being in the Air Force, that thing that gave them that sense of purpose. If you're struggling with a sense of purpose when these other things are going on, it could be soul wrenching because you don't have that place to go. I'm a Marine. Well, once a Marine, always Marine. We say that. But when service has stopped and you're trying to figure things out, that's hard. Who do you go to? And so what I always recommend folks that are transitioning is, when you transition, look for other veterans, right? You have an affinity for that group because that's who you love. That's who you have spent time with. That's who you trust. You can trust. Now, of course, there are other, sometimes people fail you, right? But for the most part, we learn to trust other service members. So be careful with who you give your trust to, but on whole, you relate to those folks. So look to find those people because they can help you because they've transitioned, they have experience, and there's a wealth of knowledge out there. They can share with that person who is transitioning their stories, or even stories of someone else that they know, that can kind of, put ideas into your head that are good ideas, positive reinforcement for whether it's finding a career or coming back to, hey, what makes you who you are, volunteering, helping other people, finding hobbies, things that will, in your downtime, occupy your heart and mind with good stuff, not sitting there, in a spiral going downhill because you're, grieving the fact that you're no longer a Marine, or that you can't figure out the personal side of life outside of serving your country. And those are real struggles. And when I look at people who leave service who are injured from combat and the struggles that they go through, everything I just talked about, I'm sure they go through, but they also have physical and maybe deeper wounds psychologically because of they're not the whole person that they once were, whether it's physically or mentally or both. So that sense of purpose and finding self beyond the greater, whole of being a service member, that's hard. And so I just hope that people, again, can look to other veterans for help, but then realize that there's goodness in helping others. And for me, that's, I think, what any issues that I was having, me realizing that my place is in the veteran space, helping folks transition, whether it's getting jobs, whether it's, helping them write resumes, interviewing, or just trying to figure out some of the things that come your way after service that are of a personal nature and how to navigate those things.
I really appreciate you sharing all that, because that does seem very common, that the grief is underestimated. I mean, it's underrated, or people don't really talk about the grief. And then also knowing that people are not alone with that probably the next veteran that you talk to who has served all that time is probably going through the exact same thing. So I love the advice that you're giving is, your service can definitely just keep continuing, when you turn around and you help that next veteran who is doing this transition. It's not like there's weakness. They're just human. I mean, that's the life you've been living. And so I really appreciate, first of all, your service, Scott. I appreciate everything that you have doing in your continued service. And I just feel like that was really great insight from the patterns that I have seen too on my end of just what veterans need to hear when they transition. So, and everybody who is listening, you can hear more of Scott's story in our book, Wounds to Wisdom, Healing Through Veteran and First Responder Narratives. It is a powerful book with 29 different stories that are all different angles of service. Everybody has their unique story, but there's such a common thread of resilience. And so there's so much to glean from their stories, from their willingness and their courage to share it. So, Scott, is there anything else that you would like to leave us with today?
Yeah, it's kind of coming back to, the last thing we talked about is that sense of purpose and things that go deeper into who you are. And I've found that helping others, the goodness that brings is in totality, right? It's not just that you're helping somebody or an organization. You spending your time and effort in helping and then seeing how your help is making a difference. That makes you feel so good, inside, spiritually, mentally, physically, because you know that, hey, I do have purpose and it's helping others, and seeing how people are benefited by work that you do is very gratifying. There's not money involved in this, right? It's not about that. It's about being a good person and wanting to help others. And that makes your heart whole, and it helps you heal. I think no matter what you're going through, what you experience through helping others is healing for everyone involved, because sometimes the folks that you're looking to help are on their last leg, and you might not even know it when you're talking to them, but because you took time and you cared enough to become involved, even if it's just listening, sometimes that's all people need is, a heart and an ear. And so understanding that sometimes your place is just to listen, but that being involved in helping people, that is something that I'm so thankful for, and that I've had the opportunity to be involved in that way.
Well, those are very wise words. And I hope that the people listening who need to hear that will just take hold of that and take that next courageous step to find other veterans to help in some way. I really appreciate talking to you today, Scott. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your wisdom and your service to other people.
Well, thank you as always, Sarah. I think so much of who you are as a person and what you're doing under the Power of Our Story. It is helping so many people, and it's not regional. It's not within the U.S. It's global. And that's something I find quite incredible. You're doing good stuff, and I'm happy to be part of it. And I appreciate your time today and interviewing me.
Oh, thank you, Scott.